favor of the motion to approve the revised bylaws, raise your hand. And that was all 5 of us. So no one is opposed. No one withheld their vote. So those bylaws are approved. Thank you. I think that the other discussion items jumping into the templates and the timeline are probably too hefty. But maybe, if we could touch on what it is that people worked on, so that when we get to there, we can just kind of jump in and pull up different templates.
Yeah. So, Madam Chair, we can go to item 2. I see Eva Labonte is on if you want.
Oh, great. Yeah. Welcome, Eva.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It's nice to meet you. I'm Eva Labonte. I'm the Assistant Director of Support Services at the county and also the Chief Human Resources Officer.
Hi, Eva. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate you sent out the salary of the department directors and a few other elected officials. So thank you for that. We just wanted to have the opportunity to ask some questions about that and ask some more general questions. If you have some more information. And so I know one of the things I was really interested in is from your perspective, what distinguishes the role of the commissioners from the responsibilities of the department directors, especially since they're kind of provided on that list. And when we're thinking about the issues of compression and things like that, I think that would be helpful for us to understand.
Absolutely. So currently the Board of Commissioners from the Human Resources perspective, they are not on day-to-day tasks. They are there to set the strategic direction for the organization and to allow us to bring ideas, programs, projects that we want to do, often that cost money, and get their input on if that's a priority for the board. And then as far as the actual execution, that's where it comes down to department director, managers, and line staff to actually execute the information. So really the big difference is strategic thinking, strategic direction versus hands-on. Our directors are not as hands-on as the next level down, but really the Board of Commissioners is not hands-on on 95% of the things that we do. They're at a much higher level.
And I just wanted to remind my fellow board members that if you have other questions, if you either just raise your hand or use the hand raise thing so that you can jump in, please feel free to do that. And I'm wondering too, in terms of budget aspects, can you just kind of speak to the differences in the roles when it comes to budget responsibilities?
Sure. So the budget responsibility kind of funnels up. We have line staff, people who do finance for all the departments. They work on budget hands-on, funneling up to a different level, usually administrative manager type level in our organization. And then it goes through the department director to do more work there and make sure it's what they're interested in, what they want to do. And then we have our deputy county administrator level, and that's in the county administrative office. And so those deputy county administrators work directly with the departments to get the budget to where it's aligned with any kind of goals we have. For example, this year we're shooting to reduce our general fund spend by 2%. So then the directors, administrative managers, financial analysts work on that, bring it to the deputy county administrator. They work on that. County administrator certainly has a look at those things. It goes to the board for review. And we have an outside budget committee. They also look at it. The final approval is with the board, typically in mid-June for the approval for July 1st. They have opportunities, at least 2, to ask questions of staff, asking for clarification, asking for more information, and trying to continually set, like I was talking about earlier, the strategic direction, and making sure that through the year, we all understand where the priorities are and that they're reflected in the budget. So they're not involved with the hands-on putting the budget together, but they certainly have every opportunity, and they do look through every page and every line item and ask questions and then give their final approval.
Go ahead, Brianna.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about just the overall comp philosophy for executive roles or kind of roles that we're considering as a commission.
Sure. And it really is the same as for all of our staff. So what we do is we do comparable studies with, and I can give you a list of the organizations that we use if you'd like. So what we do is we split things into 3 groups, and we look at each group every 3rd year. So this year, for example, we're looking at everyone who's hourly staff, and we're doing comparables for their positions compared to somewhere between 8 and 12 comparable markets, depending on the position. For example, some positions are very specifically county, like a city wouldn't have that position, so you can't compare with a city. So other ones are more broad, and we can compare with up to 11 different agencies. And then we compile that information. The next year we'll do middle management positions. And then the 3rd year we do executive level and higher. So kind of the list you saw, also division managers fall in that group. So the philosophy across all 3 of those is the same. We are always comparing the top of the range of our range to the top of our comparators' ranges. And we're shooting to be at or above the median of the market. So we're typically looking at the median. Doesn't mean we'll always do that. We're taking a hard look at how we do our classification and compensation, but that's what I want to talk about is right now, how we're doing it. So we look at that median of the market. If we are, for example, off 2.5%, 5% more, then we take a look at what we can do to fix that. And that would be, increasing the range or potentially bringing that position to a different range in our system. It also depends on budget. We can't always make every change we want to make because we only have so much money to work with. So we have to make thoughtful, planned decisions, always with an equity lens. Right now, we're looking, like I said, this year at hourly employees, and we have some that are off market enough where we're going to be making a recommendation, hoping that we can afford to make those changes for our employees. And it's the same at the executive level. We do our comparisons, and some positions will be off market, some won't be. Some of ours are above market. So if they're above market, we're not increasing the salary range. But if they're at market or right on it, typically we don't either. If they're below or off market, then we take a look at them and see what we can do as far as bringing them to that median of the market.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that would be great if you could send the list of your comparators. That'd be
sure.
Really cool.
Absolutely. I have it right here. I can type it up and send it over.
Awesome. Heike.
Thank you. So what do you take a look at as far as the compensation? Do you take a look at total compensation or just primarily the salary, or what's included in that evaluation?
That's a great question. So we have it split out into different columns in an Excel spreadsheet. We do have just straight salary. We also consider, for example, PERS pickup, which organizations pay that 6%, which ones don't, cost of benefits, and other kind of perks. So then we end up with a total compensation at the end of that. So yeah, we do look at the total compensation, but we also have it carved out by different sections in our spreadsheet, so we can decide to look at just salary or how it works. This is why it's hard to compare in the state of Washington, because their retirement system is so different. It's hard to get an accurate comparison. We try, especially in Clark County and City of Vancouver, because they are competitors, to pull the same people applying for those jobs. So we work hard to understand their system and make sure that we're doing that as fairly as we possibly can.
Something that's in the current charter is that, and it's the way that the commissioner salary is set, is that it's linked to the circuit judge I was wondering if you have any, or the circuit court judge, I was wondering if you have any background on why it was linked to that. Different counties, the commissioner salary is like kind of linked to different jobs.
Yeah, that actually predates me by quite a bit.
Okay.
So I'm really not sure where that decision was made or how it was made.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Eva, to go back to the question I asked about comp philosophy, I kind of got the impression that you might be looking at making changes in the near future. Can you speak to that, or are there any particular areas that you all are considering?
Yeah, so we're bringing in a consultant to offer us some best practices in public sector classification and compensation. And there are some big philosophical questions that the county has to answer. And we haven't had that conversation since we've had this new board. So some of those questions are around, is the median of the market where we want to be? Or do we want to be higher? Or average is different than medians. So what those kind of questions need to be answered before we can move forward on some of those changes, because it really is a change in philosophy and how we approach this. Some of the other things we want to look at are how we do. We have some our non-exempt employees who are not in collective bargaining still have steps instead of ranges. So I'd like to take a look at that. And see if we can move to more of a pay for performance system for all of our employees. I think that would be advantageous. So I want to make sure we take a good hard look at that. So some of the questions are philosophical and some of them are technical on how we implement this.
Thank you.
What other follow-up questions do you all have for Eva? Oh, Heike, go ahead.
Trying to operate all this technology. So thank you for your earlier response. And I guess a follow-up question is, you made the distinction between implementation and strategy or direction, and then you made some distinction with the budget, but are there other distinctions that you can identify between the department directors and the commissioners?
As far as their function and what they do, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
That's a good question. The directors have that. I think that kind of going back to, I think what I said before really is that day-to-day interaction and responsibility versus strategic look. I think that's the biggest difference, that it would be very unusual for a commissioner to know about any of the day-to-day activities that happen in departments, whereas department directors may very well have that information and communicating with their staff. And it's the Board of Commissioners at this point is at a different space. They really are setting the direction, and the people who come and speak to the Board of Commissioners typically are division managers, directors, assistant directors, because they're the ones that have the big picture view, and that's what the Board of Commissioners is interested in, that big picture view and what the departments are doing and the big strategic plan moving forward. For example, the thing that pops into my mind is talking about housing and how we're using our new bond money. And we're talking with the assistant director and director of housing, the board is, as opposed to the supportive housing specialists who are on the ground, who will be executing. Now, the director talks with those supportive housing coordinators and support specialists and knows what they're doing. The Board of Commissioners would not know how they execute their job.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Ava, two questions for you. The first one is, I understand that the only personnel responsibilities that the commissioners have is hiring the county administrator. Is that correct?
And also county council.
Okay. So those two report at the pleasure or whatever at will to the commissioners.
Correct.
So the personnel matters that they engage in are really just limited to that.
Correct.
Okay. And I had another question and I went right out of my brain. So I'm going to mute myself and I will think about what that question was. Sorry about that.
I'm sure it'll come to you as soon as you mute. That's how it works.
Brad, did you want to jump in?
I was just actually, Suzanne read my mind, because I was going to suggest that Eva talk about, who the board supervises and who they don't, unlike department heads and assistant directors. So you got ahead of me on that, Susan. Great job.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's a very important distinction, is that the Board of Commissioners do only supervise the county administrator and the head of county council, the county council.
And Susan,
And the director of clean water services too.
Correct. The director of clean water services, right.
Suzanne, it looks like you remembered your question.
I did. I understand that there are various assignments that the commissioners have, and I'm wondering if, in addition to the county and perhaps the clean water organization, do they have any fiduciary responsibilities or any liability related to what they do on the other boards and commissions that they are assigned to, and any legislative liaison, whatever that looks like?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think Brad's in a better spot to answer that than I am.
Yeah, we looked at that a number of years ago. We were looking at the potential liability by sitting on all these other boards, and made a decision that the county would cover them when they are sitting on those other boards and commissions. But that's why we have a list now, is because we didn't know for years what boards and commissions they were sitting on. And then I think there's some sort of head nod that everybody's okay with them being on various boards and commissions. So that's why we go through that process every year.
So that wasn't quite the nature of my question. I was wondering if the county is not that I understand all about governmental immunity and how people are indemnified, but I'm just wondering if their decisions have more weight because there's liability in certain areas, because then you would imagine that would be a role that would have more significance and perhaps would require more thought, and you'd want to make sure that you were paying people accordingly if they were making those types of decisions that went outside the organization. And then I'm not sure that you answered that was sort of a two-part question. And so what other fiduciary responsibilities do they have? Not just the liability issues, but do they have any other fiduciary responsibilities for retirement plans, for things like that? Because then that again means that their decisions carry more weight within the organization, not just for the budget and for policy and for the comprehensive plan or strategic plan. And so I'm just wondering what the scope of that is.
Oh, I understand your question better now. Thank you.
Okay.
We actually have, so PERS is on its own, and PERS is responsible, and we don't have any, we just pay what they tell us to pay. So we don't have any fiduciary responsibility there except to pay what we're supposed to be paying and reporting accurately. We do have a 457B deferred compensation plan, and the board are not fiduciaries on that. We have a deferred compensation committee, and those people are fiduciaries for that retirement plan, and that we actually have fiduciary insurance that covers those responsibilities.
Any other questions for Eva?
I just wanted to mention, people can think about things, and we can send you some written questions too afterwards. Or if you think of something else that you believe the Salary Commission needs to see, please send it to us, and we'll get it distributed. So
that would be great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Eva. We really appreciate your time today, and we may take you up on that. So,
all right. You have a great weekend, everybody.
You too. Thank you.
So,
Thanks.
Madam Chair, get us back on schedule. We have former Commissioner Scouten, followed by Commissioner Willie, then followed by Commissioner Treese.
Sounds great.
We have about 15 minutes or so per commissioner to stay on track.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Welcome, former Commissioner Scouten. We are happy that you've joined us today. We look forward to hearing a little bit more from you about your former role as a commissioner, especially given the length of time that you served as a commissioner. So I'm wondering if you could kind of start out just talking about your role and like the primary like responsibilities and activities that you were involved in, and you know, some of the decisions you made and challenges you dealt with, and just kind of walk us through, you know, where you primarily focused your time.
Well, I served on a number of outside boards. I was, and in fact, I became something of a what's the term, rescue artist or something for a number of these nonprofits that I think are rightfully seen to be organizations that are extensions of the county, that we probably would have to be doing if they weren't there. It was seen as a cost-effective way for the county to get services done through nonprofits. But I think as a consequence, as a matter of fairness, the commissioners would serve on these groups. I'm thinking of Community Action Organization for about 7-8 years, thinking of which provided aid to people of poverty, you know, help with utilities, help with housing, rent assistance, etc. I was on the West Side Transportation Alliance board for about 7-8 years. That was a sort of a ride sharing transportation coordination agency that the county thought was pretty important. I'm currently still actually finishing up my time on the Washington County, what used to be known as the Washington County Museum, now is the Five Oaks Museum. The Five Oaks Museum has much of the county's archival collections and original historical documents, but this organization agency has really evolved into being an historical and art society and sort of curator of history, and has taken on a much more inclusive, equitable kind of lens to the shows that it puts on, that it curates. But I put a fair amount of time into certainly one of my areas of emphasis was active transportation. I think the county became much more multimodal in how it looked at transportation projects that it's funded. By the way, I think a $300 million budget, and they have an EPA permit for the entire Tualatin River Basin for water quality, storm water quality, water supply, to make sure that the river continues to meet water quality standards, and of course processing sewage. So, and then they've gotten involved in material recovery, and I know one of our commissioners has been on a kind of a reinsurance agency that is providing insurance for clean water services, and also a research institute which is doing cutting edge research in the area of water quality, water recovery, and stuff like that. So Clean Water Services is no small deal, and it's actually an internationally recognized agency, probably more respected abroad than maybe locally. Yeah. Anyway, I kind of spent a few minutes, or more than a few minutes earlier today, looking at just sort of putting my thoughts together. And if you don't mind, I kind of like to kind of take it from that standpoint. We can kind of circle back to some of your questions. The county started, when I started in 2000 in June, the population was 445,000. Now we're what, 610,000. We now, I just noticed in the paper that there's an economic development manager that's been hired. So we're kind of getting into that business. We become more active. The whole tourism board, which the county is also, typically we've had a board member, I think the chair currently on the Washington County Visitors Association. That's grown quite a bit, partly because it's now getting funding that it didn't when I started. It's getting some tax dollars. So that whole effort has really grown quite a bit. The event center and the fairgrounds, now Westlake Commons, that's going to be growing in significance and has, from where things were. We also serve as the mayor and city council for about 200,000 people in urban unincorporated Washington County, and that hasn't shrunk. It's actually grown, if anything. That may stabilize out, I don't know, but that's a couple 100,000 people that we kind of serve as and I've noticed in my time, we're doing more town halls. We're doing much more public budget hearings. We didn't used to do public hearings on budgets. And of course the budget's grown a lot. What are we at, like $1 billion something now? But we're doing much more public outreach on the budget piece of it. And I think the public expectation is that the board has a greater, more detailed knowledge of the budget than I think was the case when I started back in 2000. Let's see here, those are just a couple of, I think Metro has grown in its responsibilities and its ability to impact us. So I think that there's a greater need for the board's involvement with the electeds at the Metro level. And then where we've been really woefully short, and that only has grown in terms of need and responsibility, is our dealing with state agencies that impact the county and particularly state legislature. And that place is, my wife was just telling me, she's a state representative, that there's like 4,000 bills floating out this year. Well, the volume of bills has only grown. And we used to just have one or two people working on that. We've got, 3 or 4 people now. We just, and the board just necessarily is more involved with state legislative stuff, Metro stuff. Then at the federal level, that's only grown over time. And we got a big dam project, Bureau of Reclamation. So we're involved with federal agencies as well as congressional legislative stuff. All that's grown. And then, of course, I think I mentioned the equity office. That's something new. And while I was still on the board, I'm very proud of a very strong equity, inclusion, and diversity resolution, but it also means more work and more responsibility. And we're holding more work sessions than we used to. We're doing at least one or two extra work sessions a month that we didn't before, and they're much longer. When I started, we would do 3 work sessions, one of which was maybe like a full morning. Now we're doing the same number. We're actually doing 4, what they call a Thursday. What is it? It's basically a work session. And instead of just going for the morning, it seems like it's 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, even though it's 5. We're done on our second Tuesday, and we typically go until 1, 2, 3 o'clock on the other work session on Thursdays, on the first Thursday of the month. So there's just a lot more work, more expectation, more responsibility, and I've always chosen to. I've always done what I needed to do, but there's been times, and without being too maudlin about this, when I lost my first wife, one of the ways that I dealt with my grief was I put a lot of time into. I was working probably more than full time for about 3 or 4 years after October 2014, and believe me, the job could easily do that. There's just a lot going on, and it's a question of so that's sort of some of my thoughts that I wanted to share with you. And now to circle back, what were the questions that you had for me again? I'm sorry.
So thank you. It's really helpful, especially to understand how it changed in your tenure in the role. So thank you for that. And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can talk about like some of the the types of decisions that you were responsible for making.
Well, of course, one thing that jumps in recent years, the couple of years, responsible for hiring the chief administrative officer. We had to that 2 or 3 times, a couple of times. The Bob Davis replacing Charlie Cameron, and now just very recently Tanya Ainge. That's a very time-consuming, pretty important piece, obviously. We've also done that recently with Diane Taniguchi Dennis. And now this new board, I kind of started, but I left, picking a new county council. We were responsible for figuring out how we were going to pay for all the infrastructure in North Bethany, this whole new area that was added to the urban growth boundary about 10 years ago. That was a huge job for us to figure out how we were going to be paying for the roads, the water lines, the sewer lines, the parks, and be able to really open the door to development after this area was included into the urban growth boundary lines. So that was we've been another bigger project was redoing the comprehensive plan for the Aloha area. We were very fortunate back around 2012, it was still during the Obama administration, we got a very large $1 million plus planning grant from the Obama administration, cutting edge kind of urban planning grant to update the comprehensive plan for Aloha, redesign the town center at 185th and TV Highway.
I think you froze, Dick.
Certainly the dam project. What's that?
You seem to be having internet issues here periodically, Dick.
Okay. Is there anything I need to repeat?
Well, we missed about the last 30 seconds. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
about the Aloha project.
Yeah, that was a big project. That and the North Bethany, how to finance all the local infrastructure. Sort of the issues involved, at least for me personally, I was involved with a very controversial, very, very controversial affordable housing project that took up a whole chunk of time back in 2017, 16 or something. It was a housing project for people with mental health issues and who had formerly but no longer had substance abuse issues. Not something that people in this particular neighborhood wanted, but I think it was a great location and we finally got that through. We've been involved in, one thing that people kind of forget about the county board is I would guess, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe 40% of all the state legislators are actually appointed by county commissioners. In my time on the county board, we appointed usually 10 or 12 legislators in my 20 years on the board. And so there's sort of an overlooked piece of the job. Other big projects that I personally worked on, I worked on a couple of big park projects. I put together a multi-partnership that purchased 30 acres hilltop property in West Beaverton, the Mount Williams property, which the county was a significant funder, but there were a lot of other funders and the county kind of helped put that together. Helped kind of be the sort of senior partner in that. And that was the same thing with a $1.5 million all abilities field that was put into a THPRD park in Aloha. That was $1.5 million capital campaign in which the county ended up putting in about $500,000. But I kind of helped bring all these other partners in and using our $500,000 as leverage to be successful in that $1.5 million capital campaign. I'd say in the last 10, 12 years, the county has become a much more active partner with THPRD, which is a park provider for 250,000 people, and has got a huge park system. It's probably the best park system in the state, but it takes, they're our park provider for a big chunk of urban unincorporated Washington County. So that's taken up some additional time. And very specifically, the Mount Williams land acquisition, 30-acre, and the $1.5 million capital campaign for the All Abilities field, where we're financing or fundraising or kind of things I put together that were sort of in my district that took up a chunk of time. In the case of Mount Williams, back around 2004, 2005, and then this All Abilities field around the 15 or 16 time period, I think it was. Other projects that I've been involved in. Well, those are some of those that sort of stick out in my mind. We also, we also ended up appointing a sheriff or two as well. When a sheriff leaves in midterm, the county board actually makes the appointment. And then that person is subject to election, but there again is another position that the board is responsible. So it really does go well beyond just the three people that we appoint. We get involved in these legislative appointments as well as the sheriff.
Well, thank you, former Commissioner Schouten. Sorry. I don't see any follow-up questions from anyone, and I think we're about to the end of our time with you. So just wanted to pause for a minute to make sure that was true from my fellow board members. Okay. Well, we really appreciate you for joining us and sharing about your role.
You're welcome. Thank you. Have fun.
We will.
Bye.
So, Madam Chair, next we have Commissioner Jerry Willey from District 4, which is the Hillsborough area west of the county. So welcome, Commissioner Willey.
Awesome. Welcome, Commissioner Willey. Really
Thank
happy
you.
to have you. So why don't we start by just kind of handing it over to you to share any comments or thoughts, and then we will probably have some follow-up questions.
Okay. Well, I just listened in on Dick and his presentation, and certainly his tenure is a lot longer than mine. I'm in my third year, but previous to that, I was mayor of Hillsborough for 8 years. So I'm always in the process of contrasting the responsibilities of being mayor versus being a county commissioner. And it's always, it was kind of eye-opening to me, actually, the difference between the two. And so from my standpoint, being a county commissioner, especially in District 4, my district is primarily all of the rural land of the county. So I'm all on the western end of it. So my district has basically, I say 5.5 cities in it, half of Hillsborough, and then the other are small communities, Forest Grove and Cornelius and those. I also touch 4 counties. And so my focus is much broader from the standpoint of, I'm gonna have to be fast because I got 10% energy. I didn't even notice that. So, so my responsibilities are a little bit differently. I think the contrast that I look at is I take the same perspective as as county commissioner, because when I was running for this position, my question back was always, so what does a county commissioner do? And nobody knows what a county commissioner does. So it's kind of an education. You say, okay, these are some of the things that we get involved in, and certainly all of the boards and commissions that we sit in. The typical things are approving the budget, certainly spending our money efficiently and where it needs to be going, and make sure we have reserves that will meet crisis issues such as COVID and the pandemic. We have put together a pretty extensive list of board priorities, and the board priorities are designed to give staff direction as to where we want them to go and what's important to us. And you've heard about the DEI initiative that certainly we passed a couple of years ago or a year ago, and put that into place and in the process of doing that. So I look at my role as a county commissioner, a staff perspective, as trying to set direct and letting them know where my priorities are and how they can help me and I can help them accomplish those things. Outside of the four walls of the building, working with the public, going to board meetings, working with the chambers, working with Metro. Now that legislature, as Dick pointed out, 4,000 bills. I've been tracking probably a dozen or more bills, and I've been using our government relations team that's doing a great job doing all of those things, just so I'm in the know of where I think I'd be willing to step in and say, I really agree with that, or I really disagree with that. And so that's kind of where I spend a lot of my time. And I do spend a lot of time working with the boards and committees that I'm on. And two projects right now that I'll be real quick on, and then I'll wait for the questions, is the pandemic has emphasized how badly our rural broadband issues are. So our folks out in the counties don't have rural broadband or have poor broadband. That's something that the state of Oregon is woefully behind on. And so I'm working with COLPAC, which is a group of representatives, county commissioners from the 4 counties, as to how we can get this ball rolling and get started on it. And so I'm talking to legislators, I'm talking to other county commissioners, and those looking at the state of Washington, because they're way ahead of us. So just looking at those kinds of things, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time pushing that direction. And then the other is much more fun, actually. It's the Salmonberry Trail. It's a new trail that goes from Banks basically up and over the Coast Mountains and ends up in Tillamook. It's 88 miles. I won't be around long enough to see that completed, but a very, very fun project. And it's just those kinds of things where it's not like I'm a decision maker, but we certainly collaborate and bring in partners and educate and do everything we can to get that accomplished. So I tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my phone to finish up this, because I got 5 minutes and it's probably not going to go much further. So anyway, when it blanks off, I'll be back. So any questions you have?
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Commissioner Wiley, yes, I'm on DSL, but it seems to be working. So I do have a question, especially since you were the mayor of Hillsborough. If you could tell us a little bit about the duties that are provided by the county that are not provided by these municipalities, because I imagine there are some services that are provided just by the county that the municipalities rely on.
Absolutely. And I think that was what was most eye-opening to me, was the contrast. Probably the two biggest are Sheriff's Department. I mean, Hillsborough has a police department, but it doesn't have a jail, doesn't have juvenile facilities, doesn't have a court system. We don't have a district attorney. So that in and of itself, I think, is our largest budget department. And so that's just a second here. So that was one of them. And then the other is Health and Human Services. What a huge benefit that has, but what a huge challenge. I have spent a significant amount of my time in the last year dealing with CARES dollars We allocated some of our $105 million to business recovery. Commissioner Treese and I oversaw that. And so we've spent a good portion of the last 8 months working with the cities in Washington County and other organizations to try and get money and grants out into our businesses to help keep them alive through this whole process. And so that came through our Health and Human Services Department, and that obviously was considerably different than the city of Hillsborough. So that's two of the big ones, I would say.
Thank you. Heike, go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner Willie, just from your perspective, what do you think is the knowledge that's required? We heard earlier that really detailed knowledge of budget is required, but from your perspective, what would be the knowledge that would be required in your position?
Well, certainly knowing the lay of the land politically, knowing other individuals that are not only elected individuals, but like chambers of commerce, their boards, Westside Economic Alliance that Commissioner Treese is involved with. All of those are areas of where expertise is required. The reason why I bring out a budget, I'm a retired CPA, so I love numbers and work a lot with, I guess, evaluating our processes and deciding, I guess, if I think they're efficient enough and those kinds of things. So budgets obviously are a big deal to me. But other than that, the expertise to me is plain old listening to people, hearing what their concerns are, be candid with them. I quickly tell people that when they want to talk about a specific issue that they have, and I say, well, have you talked to the directors? Have you talked to the staff? Yes, but I want to talk to you. And I just say, you realize you're talking to the lowest rung of the educational ladder here. I'm the least involved with LUT things and permitting and all of those things, but I'll listen to your story and, I'll see if I can facilitate getting answers to you. And if you don't like the answers, we can talk about that. But to me, listening is probably a very significant perspective that you have to have.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
One more question. What % of time do you feel you spend on your commissioner duties during the week? If you had a 40-hour day, and because you said you're retired, so I don't know if you spend most of your time on commissioner duties, like what's that typical day look like or week look like in terms of the % of time you spend on county business?
Well, I think a little bit like Dick talked about, but every Tuesday is work sessions and a board meeting. Fourth Tuesday is an evening board meeting. So Tuesdays generally for me can easily be a 10-hour or a 12-hour day. And then the rest of the week depends on how my boards and committee meetings fall into there. But then you have to incorporate, reading your packets, doing your homework, making your phone calls. Certainly COVID has added a new dimension to that. So easily I might spend 30 hours one week and 50 hours the next week. And so it's an ebb and flow on that. And quite frankly, you can manage some of it, but I find when I try and back away from it and not do the homework that I'm supposed to be doing, I'll pay for it in the next week or the next time that meeting comes around. So I try and stay on top of all that. It's amazing, as all of you know, it's amazing the number of hours we spend doing exactly this, Zoom calls, and then following up with phone calls, and then following up with reading material, either in preparation for these meetings or follow up to these meetings. So Yeah, a 30-hour work week would be probably light. But I'd guess we average between 35 and 40 hours a week. And I think that varies. I personally believe probably the chair spends considerably more than that. And maybe there's other commissioners that spend more than that, but that's a typical week for me.
Other questions for Commissioner Willie? Okay, great.
All right, we made it. All right, I think I have 2% left. Good job.
Hey. Thank you so much for your time today. It was nice to meet you.
All right, well, thank you for your time too. I look forward to your findings.
All right, Madam Chair, next we have Commissioner Treese, the District 2 area, so the Bethany, Cedar Hills, north of 26 line. So welcome, Commissioner Treese.
Hello, it's nice to see you, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I've had the opportunity to listen to both former Commissioner Scouten and Commissioner Willie. So, it's been interesting to hear their perspectives, and there's nothing that I disagree with to start out with. So, would you like me to just start as Commissioner Willie did, just talking first and then move to Q&A? Does that work for you? Okay.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Couple things that I think are important for you to know. I am a first-time politician. I was elected, I'm in my 3rd year as the chair is, as Commissioner Willie is. I come to this with a strong business perspective. I'm currently also the executive director of Westside Economic Alliance. When I ran for office, I was under the impression that it was a part-time job. And as it turned out, I was one of the authors and one of the people to push for the work that you're doing right now. It became clear to me that it really wasn't. And as I reflect on this, it is a personal, it's a personal choice how much the commissioners put into this work. My story is that I came in my 1st year, I was the co-chair of the Metro Transportation Bond that did not pass, but I co-chaired the process to bring the region together to agree on the variety of projects, to agree on what we would put forward. We were not the architects of the taxation methodology, but did a tremendous amount of work throughout the region to build that measure. And I wasn't put into that role. Lynn Peterson, the president of Metro, asked me to be the co-chair along with JVP, Commissioner Vega Peterson. And the reason was because of the people that I know and the relationships that I have and my ability to bring together disparate groups for a common cause, if you will. My point in bringing this up is that wasn't something that I had anticipated I would be doing, but it's the type of work, and it took a tremendous amount of time, a tremendous amount of effort, up to 3 or 4 meetings a week with a variety of teams, a lot of work with our LUT department, and understanding and moving issues forward, as well as trying to make sure that there was a balance around the region for what we were asking for. But that's the type of thing that, in my view, when you sign up or when you ask to be elected into this job, one of the questions was, what skills do you have? Well, the public is the group that really decides what skills they want to see in these seats. It just so happens that we bring different pieces to that puzzle. But I think what you do is you really lean to what your strengths are, what your strengths have been, and how you've developed your experience level. So my 1st year, as I mentioned, that was a huge commitment. And in fact, as the commission, we look at different assignments and committees and boards, as you are aware. And my list was a little bit shorter, but the reason it was shorter that year was because of the awareness of how much time this other initiative would take. So that's an example of work that isn't necessarily what you would define as a part of the job of a commissioner, but it becomes part of a clear responsibility to the people that we represent. And I was listening to Eva talk a little bit. We certainly do not direct the work of departments. We don't tell them what to do. If anything, the relationship is kind of reversed. They come to us and ask us we can help them get things done, whether it's a constituent issue, whatever it might be. I find myself working very closely with land use and transportation, and mostly because of the Get Moving initiative, but also a long history of working with them previously, and the Health and Human Services Department. I said that my first year and a half was absorbed by Get Moving. The second year was absorbed by the COVID response work that we did. And Commissioner Willie talked about that a little bit, but it was really intense. I mean, we had a series of meetings. Brad knows, I see him shaking his head. He knows about the involvement that our team had, and we had a portion of the $104 million. But our job was really to support the business community, and I worked in that business recovery piece as well as the daycare piece. And that's what I think the commissioner's role is to be able to provide that type of support. And it wasn't sitting like an elected official and nodding your head and going, well, yes, that sounds good. That sounds good. It was like, roll up your sleeves. Let's put these charts together. I've got my Excel sheet going. We're all working together. So, I've been in business I'm 69 years old, for my entire career. And I work as hard as a team player here as I have in any job, if not harder. There's certainly, you understand that you come with the mantle of leadership, and you recognize what that is. But at the same time, any good leader is going to get in and work right alongside everybody else. So that's kind of the way I see it. The other thing that I don't think has been mentioned enough, there's two things. One is the clean water service piece, as former Commissioner Scouten mentioned, is a big piece. And Eva's responsibility is the county, but if you look to Diane Taniguchi-Dennis and ask her what our relationship is, it's as deep there as it is in the county. So I would underscore that relationship. The other piece is that what all of us bring to the table is our political capital. And that's not something that, you can put a price tag on, or, ask how many hours does it take to spend that capital. But it's really about the fact that I can pick up the phone and call, Senator Wagner. I can pick up the phone and call different representatives and ask for support for issues in relationship to legislature. I am, Lynn Peterson and I work very closely together. I work very closely with other counselors at Metro. And when we come to key issues like how are we going to move forward on the affordable housing bond, or how are we going to move forward on our supportive housing services measure, that's where we come in. So it's not like line responsibilities, but it's really tying the bow on the package and making sure that we have the relationships and we have we represent the public and can finish the deal for the public. So that's kind of I've kind of gone on here. Like I said, I'm a first-time politician, but the way I talk, you wouldn't think so, right? So, so I apologize if I've taken too much airtime. So do you have questions?
Thank you for that. And no, you didn't take too much airtime. I wanted to ask just kind of a brief follow-up, because it is one of the things that we are interested in, like really specifically exploring. And it's the part-time versus full-time status. You touched on it earlier, it was brought up. Can you just kind of more specifically describe like how much time, on average do you spend in your role as commissioner?
Well, I listened closely to what Commissioner Willie was talking about, and I would agree with him. I'm full-time at Westside Economic Alliance, and I am working every single week, easily 60 plus hours. And my job at the county is frequently in the nighttime. That's when I'm spending there. I look at my calendar, the second week of the month, every single night I have a meeting. And I have not been as attentive to the meetings, for example, our community participation organizations. I'm feeling badly that I don't get to as many of those meetings as I'd like to. That's where I should be doing what I am elected to do, which is to represent the people. So, and that unfortunately falls off the radar because I've got these other assignments that I need to get done. So, and during this COVID time, I have been furloughed I'm the executive director, so I furloughed myself to meet budget needs at Westside Economic Alliance down to 60%. And what's really been interesting is, you never work 60%, it's when you're the leader of the organization. But what's happened is that my work time at the county has gone up as my work time at Westside Economic Alliance has dropped a little bit. The void is endless, is what I'm trying to say here. I know that I could spend a lot more time in the other than I do, and I'm already at between 30 and 50 on a bi-week basis. But the other thing that we're not doing, and I didn't do before COVID, and now for certain we're not doing it, is having a presence in the office. And that's something that I think is a missing factor for us as leaders to work together and to have those casual conversations in the hallways, as well as being present for staff and those conversations where you get, as we all know, a lot done. We've been separated from that by COVID, but we know that as we come back to whatever our new normal will look like, I think that's another piece that, as I hope we move to full-time status, will allow us to do. So how many hours am I working? Never enough, but a lot. I can tell you that my family did not expect me to be working this much. I did not expect myself to be working this much. No complaining. It's what needs to happen, especially right now. But I have a feeling that this job is always going to have an especially right now element to it. So I just have a sneaky suspicion that might be the way it goes. And there are those of us that are the types of individuals. I think anybody who runs for this office is going to be the type of person that wants to fill that void too. That's my sense.
Thank you. That's a really helpful illustration. Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne.
Hi there. The Commissioner Willie talked about the size of how much time it takes to review a packet. And I imagine that you have a packet for your Tuesday meetings and then perhaps for maybe your Thursday meeting. But what's the average size of a packet? I used to work for a city and county in Colorado, Broomfield, and so I know what those packets look like. So I'm curious, how, on average, how big are they and how much time does it take you to do a thorough review?
Okay. Well, before we go to that question, I hope none of your former friends and neighbors had airplane parts in their front yard.
They did, and actually the open space manager was running on the trail in the commons when the planes started coming into the commons area, and thankfully no one was hurt. So
oh my goodness,
quite a buzz.
Oh my goodness. Well,
everyone was safe.
It was just a miracle
It was a miracle.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts are with your former city and with the people there. As far as how long it takes to read the packages, it's, the packets, it's not, it can vary. Sometimes it'll take me, it really depends on the issue and what my familiarity is with the issue. If I don't know enough about the issue, I'm going to be reading it in depth. And I'll tell you very honestly, again, first term myself, I've been caught a couple times when I didn't read it enough. So I've learned my lesson, and I allocate time. I allocate at least 2 hours for a commission day, and that's minimum. And that means that I'm allowing for a phone call if I need to make a phone call, or if I'm looking at the consent agenda and concerned about, should this really be in the consent portion? Should we be moving it? That type of thing. But it's not just those packets. I have probably at least, I'm trying not to overstate this, but at least 2 briefings a week. Maybe that's a lot. Brad, you think that that's probably pretty accurate? And when you're having a briefing, we have an exotic animal ordinance coming up, and Brad and I have been working on this. I got the constituent call. I had to, I pulled together the first discussion. Then we've had briefings about what we're going to do in relationship to this ordinance. And I've spent time with the constituents, with the former ordinance, reading what happened previously and making sure I'm adequately prepared. Now that one, I'm going to be more in the driver's seat because the constituents came to me. So I've spent more time there probably. But whenever there's a briefing, I've got 2 roads right now in District 2, Salzman Road and Thompson are both causing issues in relationship to what improvements we put on those. I've spent hours reading the packets and understanding what the history has been, understanding what the committees have moved forward with. So it's and trying to navigate the politics of the situation, both on the commission and in the community. So it's not just what you would assume are the public facing packets that we see. It's all the other pieces. And I do believe that the strength of a good commissioner is going to be walking that line of constituent input and staff response, and being the thread that ties those 2 together. That's where I think our strength comes in, and our ability to make sure that the public feels that they are heard, we have responded appropriately, they understand what the response is about, and the staff understands what I'm hearing from the public and where we need to bend and move a little differently. So this goes back to that comment about, no, we don't direct staff. That's not the way we are organized. But we have, because of that, we have a very unique working relationship with the staff and can get things done even though we don't have positional authority to do that. Another example would be, I spoke at the Muslim Educational Trust right after the Christmas, or right during the Christmas holiday, and they were talking early about vaccines, okay, and how this was going to roll out. I was on a panel with OHA, with other people, other elected leaders, and ahead of time I talked to our director, Marnie Kyle, our public health director, and said, can we do a vaccine clinic on site at MET? Because I think that that's what they're going to be asking for. So we did that work to figure it out first. Then I get to be the hero and bring it forward. But the point is that that's the type of relationship we have with the staff that isn't a line, it isn't a org chart relationship, but it's getting the right work done effectively. So as you all know, in HR, that's a much harder relationship to manage than if I tell you so. We're not in that job. So anyway, I don't know if that answered the question. You was about the length of the packet. Sorry.
Madam Chair, can I ask my question?
Brianna.
Okay, thank you. I'll try to make it quick. I know the intent of the formation of this commission is really to allow opportunities for people who may not have access to these roles and making sure that they're compensated adequately. Can you share a little bit about being a newer politician, how you would factor in that onboarding and learning curve for someone who's had no previous experience in this type of role?
I didn't have experience as a politician, but I've already told you how old I am, and that I've had a long career. So I didn't have that. Nobody needed to teach me how to deal with non-positional authority and relationships and that type of thing. But as we look to trying to age down our commission, as we look at trying to open it up to a variety of different people, I think we have to be prepared for bringing people with less experience on board. And I don't see how you can do that without this being a full-time, fully compensated role. And when I look at our county and what our history of growth has been and what our projected growth is going to be, we need to have a board that's reflective of who our county is. And to be able to get to that point, I feel really strongly that we need to be able to bring commissioners into this role with the understanding that they don't have to have a whole nother source of income to survive. And so that, Brianna, I don't know if that really got to your question, but I'm not your typical new politician at my age with my experience level, but Nafisa is. She's closer to that model that we're talking about, I think. And yet she's had a tremendous amount of experience too. So, we've had such a huge change in the county in the last 4 years. I mean, we've got 4 new commissioners. We've got a new county administrator. We've hired, Diane Taniguchi was hired just before the 3 new commissioners came on. And we've got, we'll be hiring a new general counsel. I mean, things have just, we are not the same county that we were before. But I think that's a reflection of all the needs that we're going to have moving into the future as well. And it's my strong belief that we need to have full-time commissioners to be able to meet those needs. The other piece that I'll say is that I don't know how far we are away from term limits for our commissioners. And if you're in a term limit situation, I think it becomes even more important to be full-time. And the other piece, one of you, and I don't know who it was, asked early on, what's this business about the commissioners being paid a percent? The chair is paid at 80%, I think, of the district court judge, and the commissioners are paid 40% of the chair. That goes back to when we were much more agricultural. We were less than 2. That's in the 1940s. So just know that it was a county that looked much more like our Eastern Oregon counties do now than the urban county with the largest employer in the state, and with the issues that our other large counties have. And as you know, we're projected to be bigger than Multnomah County within the next 10 years, and bigger by a population base. So I sound like I'm preaching here, I apologize, but I do think that this is the commissioner's role. What I want to make sure I tell you is that I think the commissioner's role is much more, I know I work really closely with staff all the time. And I'm worried that after the kind of presentation that we set this up with, it didn't sound like that as much. It sounded like there was more separation. And, you know, that's for me, that's not true at all. So I just put that out there. I think it's important for you to know as we work forward. Do you have another? Am I way over my time now?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we have Chair Harrington on deck to present to you.
Okay, and whenever Kevin comes up, you know it's like.
So helpful. Well, thank you, Commissioner Treese, for your time today and for answering questions.
Well, hello to Catherine. And I just want to say thank you to Steve and to all of you for the work that you're doing. It's really important work. And I just appreciate your professionalism and your time on this. So thank you very much. And Catherine, they're all yours.
No, I'm all theirs, actually.
Welcome, Chair Harrington. We're really happy to have you here today. We'd like to just hand it over to you to, provide some opening comments, and just like with the others, we'll most likely have follow-up questions for you.
Great. Well, I'm concerned. It ends up that in the last 24 hours, Maria Pope, the CEO of PGE, has asked to have another phone call with me, and that's slated for 4:30. So I'm in a wee bit of a panic that my time is limited. So I wrote up some notes for myself, and I'm just going to run through it as fast as I can, but hopefully I won't sound like the FedEx commercial.
That's
so. Let me start with thank you very much for serving on the Salary Commission. I greatly appreciate your expertise and time and that of Mr. March. The nature of doing this job has changed, and the need for age and ethnic diversity is significant. And more importantly, the need for a family wage job for the commissioners who are elected to do this job. Prior to January 2019, there was a lot of management done to keep the work of all 5 commissioners really at a part-time level. In addition, to ensure that there was limited public visibility into the policy and investment work of the board. For example, the board had meetings for half days on Tuesday, twice a month from 8:30 to 10 for a work session, and 10 to 12 o'clock for board meetings. Once a month, those meetings happened in the afternoon for a couple of hours, and then a 6:30 meeting. So total of 3. Then one time a month, they had an extended work session that often only ran from 8:30 to 12. And that was it. Sometimes there were briefings, but not always. And in fact, your legal rep isn't going to like to hear me say this, but luckily he wasn't in the room. The chair and the CAO made policy decisions on behalf of the full board behind closed doors that were not taken to the full board and in forward meetings. The bottom line is we now have a board that is fully engaged by virtue of the reality of our 21st century. And there are 11 points I'd like to share with you on that. Openness and transparency. The board, as of 2019, is doing its work in public. And for example, our packets are public. Prior to January 2019, a work session packet was an agenda only, and it was hard to get the materials. I know, I was an elected Metro councilor. I tried, it was hard as hell. We're also working on the full breadth of the Washington County portfolio. The community needs, we're transitioning from methodologies where the board would say, well, what money do we have to invest and how can we spend it? Which really meant, what can we build? They liked to build stuff, but now we're transitioning to the realities of the 21st century and looking at more of a frame of what does the community need? And we have a heck of a lot more work to do there as later this year, we start framing up the Washington County strategic plan structure and kick that off with a work plan sometime in 2022. It's going to be a multi-year, multi-pronged effort. Fourth point, equity. You know, our community has changed, our work has changed, our board has changed and needs to continue changing. Social justice and restorative justice require time. Climate change requires time. Our budget. I want to make sure I have colleagues that better understand the ins and outs of the budget and how we put policy into action through our budget investments. And it's a tough budget time. And also that we have a board that's comfortable initiating policy changes, policy initiatives. We've certainly had to hire new leadership, first with a CAO, our first ever Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, and now a new county council. Boy, does that stuff take time. We have a heck of a lot of modern practices for this agency to incorporate. And we're really just starting, as shown by our website kickoff last week. We have a lot of underlying infrastructure that's going to require millions of dollars to invest, and it's going to take time. We're going to have to weigh some really hard decisions to develop a roadmap with us in concert with our CAO and her staff. What has really been limiting, and it's my last 2 points, not only for my colleagues to maintain their constituent relations, but because they've been part-time, I've had to neglect my own legislative agendas, things that you may be more familiar with Multnomah County commissioners doing, as well as even Clackamas County commissioners. They're being compensated more in line with full-time. And then lastly, another area that has fallen on me that even I've had to make very limited choices, and it's our organization connections. The Association of Oregon Counties, I've been trying mightily, but I'm doing the minimum with regard to the legislative committee, the board of directors, and just now starting to get involved with specific legislative steering committees. And NACO, we have zero presence. We're not even able to learn from their policy conferences or what other counties are doing. I don't have the bandwidth because of all the change that and improvements that have been needed, let alone my district colleagues struggling. So we really need to get with the modern times, and we're totally reliant upon you to help us to set the stage, not help us. You get to decide what the pay scale is. So that's it from me as quickly as I possibly could. I'm sorry. I look forward to your questions, and I'll come back if you need me to.
Thank you. Thank you for walking through those. Does anyone have any questions just in the next minute or so for Chair Harrington?
She's going to call me, so until you hear my phone ring, I'm yours. Oh my gosh, no questions?
You've touched a little bit on how your role differs or how it should differ. Could you go into that a little bit more with the time that you have? Like, how is your role as the chair different than the other commissioners?
Certainly. My colleagues and staff rely upon me to help frame up different topics for them. I joined your meeting right towards the very end with Commissioner Treese, and she talked about the exotic animal ordinance and working with staff to frame that up. Just about every topic that comes to the board in a work session, not every, but I'd say a good 60% of them, if not more. Staff meets with me in advance to make sure that they are framing up issues in a way that would be productive for the Board of Commissioners. I'm not developing the content. a lot of it has to do with, that's really not the right question, or you're taking us into details. We need to stay up at the policy and investment level. And that takes a bunch of time. That's, I'm the at-large elected chair. My district elected colleagues are making countywide decisions, but they tend to be a bit more focused on constituent issues. They've also been really challenged to share the load of committee assignments, which from our roundtable packet last month, you've got that full table of what we have to get covered. Also, I work really closely with the CAO and the county council to try and frame up different issues. So there's a lot of that. I'm also the chief spokesperson for the Board of Commissioners. I have been I am married to the idea that I am one of 5. And I'm very clear with that for our staff, people outside. I have 1 vote of 5 votes. I don't do a power play here with my colleagues that, well, I'm the chair, right? It's been very important for me for all 4 of them to understand I am one of 5 and I see them as my equal. I also meet with each of them once a month.
Thank you. Suzanne?
How might your role change should these commissioners become full-time? What do you imagine that will look like? Because it sounds like you do some things for them. And what might they do to help you?
Well, I think they're going to have more bandwidth to deal with several of those topics that I've talked about versus my having to carry all of that on my shoulders. But particularly the last 2 items that I mentioned, our own individual legislative agendas, I haven't been able to focus more on that because I've had to carry an extensive load. They haven't been able to really focus on that either. And then the organization representation. Multnomah County and Clackamas County commissions have multiple board members participating in that organization. And I don't have the luxury of that. And it is felt too by the Multnomah County and Clackamas County boards because the 3 of us are the largest urban counties in the state. You know that our area, our metropolitan area, carries the majority of population in the state. But when you have 30 more commissioners from elsewhere in the state, much more rural, attending these meetings and exercising that voice, it's imperative that the rural commissioners, small in number though we are present and able to be the voice for our population. Otherwise, it's skewed.
Brianna?
Curious if there's been any thought given about kind of the change management of how you'll make this shift from having part-time folks on the commission and going to full-time, and how that behavior change will happen once this commission comes to some sort of resolution.
Well, as you saw through my memo, that 3 of the 4 district part-time commissioners are ready to make that change. Commissioner Rogers is in a unique situation, owning and running his own business, and that's why I asked you to consider whatever kind of language, legislative language, appropriate language you might be willing to entertain for such a unique situation. I believe wholeheartedly that outside of his unique situation, that we need to ensure that these are full-time positions because of the nature of the work and the size of county that we are. For that change management, well, while I'm optimistic about the work that you'll be doing, I am not. There's no guarantee. You could decide to cut all of our salaries, right? You could decide to leave everything the way it is. That's really up to you. So I've heard multiple people say, well, as of the start of the next budget year, when you have a full-time commission, I've been like, no, 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 I don't know that. I'm not making plans for that. I can't. So I think it will be far easier for us to adjust, but I'm going to do that in association and in collaboration with my colleagues. For example, we have frequently been in a situation where we've been in a bind on weighing in on different issues because we only meet one day a week, unlike both Multnomah and Clackamas County commissions, right? And I notice also from serving on the Metro Council, having 2 days a week where you have board meetings and spreading the demand over the course of the day really helps. I mean, it's really hard to be attentive, especially in Zoom meetings from 8:30 in the morning till 5 p.m. Our brains just get tired. So those are just a couple of things to entertain.
Suzanne.
Follow-up question based on what you said, and I'm interested in the pay differential. So we know that you serve as the chair. If these folks become full-time, we know right now what the pay is. What's kind of your experience around what you've seen in other public sector organizations where there is a chair and then perhaps some commissioners, and what differential comes to mind for you?
Well, there's certainly a different political risk because I am elected at large, whereas they're elected by 1/4, right, of the population. So that puts certain demands on the chair that they won't have to face. It's really hard for me to quantify it in terms of dollars. While it would be very nice for you to differentiate them somehow, following logic, I mean, I'm not at all suggesting that it's ad hoc or seat of the pants. I do know that it's full time for all of us. And I just have, as being the chair and the need to make sure that things are framed up for the group, for representing the group and taking that risk countywide and the pressures involved. Those are just 3 nature of the job differences that come to mind for me. I've really focused more on trying to make the case before the voters that we've either reached or we're beyond the point of readiness for this, and just doing all I can to ensure that I'm enabling you, commissioning you to look at how transitioning the board for more diverse representation via age as well as ethnicity is really needed. I hope you won't cut my pay, but that's up to you. I know you'll do a good job, partly because Steve March is helping you, and I know he's skilled and experienced in this. He knows how to make sure that you get the data you need. So I have a lot of faith in you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Chair Harrington? And it looks like we got lucky and you didn't get interrupted yet.
I know. I hope I turned my ringer on properly.
Maybe she lost power.
Yeah.
No, I haven't at all. Thank you again for serving on the Salary Commission. I'm really, really so impressed that we've gotten folks with such passion and such caliber to serve. I'm really grateful for it. And I look forward to hearing what the results are of your deliberation. And I know that Clerk Moss and Mr. March will pull me in if you need any further information or thoughts from me. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, so and I think that is our last invited testimony for today, correct? The other two commissioners will be here next time?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes left. So let's go ahead to the next agenda item, which is looking at the comparator templates and just discussing identifying our gaps are there. So we had the internal template and then an external template. So I don't know if one of you would like to start.
Actually, both of them come from, so which one do you have pulled up there? Actually, both of these come from Multnomah County as some of the documentation that we collect. And for the internal, I've added information that we would look at. And some of that, in addition to the minimum and the maximum, would be the supervisory experience. And for us, that would go from lead worker up to an executive level. And we have, for our county, we have everybody identified at a particular management level. So it's a little bit easier, I think, with the jurisdictions. That's a little bit harder, especially when you get to more maybe your middle management to executive, if they really have done that prior analysis. The other thing for columns J, K, and L, it's more of the summary of what the duties are, getting into what minimum qualifications are, what really distinguishes the job from one another. And then column K is really kind of what our supervisory org is, what that looks like, the number of FTE, who they supervise, what the highest position is, and then just our general notes of what are some of the unique scenarios of what the supervisory orgs do, what some of the project work is, anything that would really distinguish that particular job from another one. So this is very much a draft version that, as we've heard the conversations today and have heard each of the individuals talk about how they view their job, if there's additional columns that we want to add, or if this is sufficient, especially on that internal look.
Does anyone have any questions or comments on it? I know I was just kind of thinking, it seems like, you know, the major thing will be determining which classifications are we going to include in this comparator. So
my screen is funny, so I can't raise my hand. Casey, if you don't mind recognizing me.
Oh yeah, please go ahead.
I do have a question about, I like what's here, and I'm wondering if there's any value, and I know you said internal focus, so I don't know if there's an external focus that's coming next.
There is. Laura had forwarded during the last meeting an external document that we often use at the county. So I know that Kevin has a copy of that one that can be pulled up, that so that we have two very distinct worksheets. And Laura, if you want to go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, I can start. And Brianna, feel free to jump in. We actually worked on this together this week, looking at some of the things that in my experience we've gathered, but also comparing to other jurisdiction surveys that I've participated in. and then just additional conversations around information that we felt would be good to gather from whatever jurisdiction list we end up deciding on. So there's 2 tabs for commissioner and chair, and they're mostly the same. So similar to what Susan went over, the classification title of where we're matching to. And then we were looking at gathering annual salary, what that position is at the county, how many are in the position. So that column applies to the commissioners, gathering how many commissioners each jurisdiction has. The budgeted number of direct and indirect FTE if those commissioners and the chair supervise any staff in their roles, if they have any budget responsibilities or other project oversight. And then getting more into the compensation part of things, we wanted at PERS contribution. So if that 6% is picked up in the Oregon jurisdiction, any additional pay, stipends, or add-ons such as a car payment or cell phones, anything like that. If they have a projected cost of living increase for the coming year, and I guess paired with that would be if their elected officials are eligible for COLA. And then if they have any deferred compensation that they receive. And then the end column, leaving room for ERI adjustments if they are out of the Portland area. And then one thing that Brianna and I had talked about but isn't yet on this template was adding in an additional column so that we could look at not only the ERI adjusted salary, but what that total compensation calculation might look like. So if we want to take salary and then add in 6% if the PERS pickup is there, or deduct 6% in Washington County's case, and then any other pay add-on, so that we can have one column for just compensation and then one column for a more of a total compensation look.
Suzanne.
Would there be any value to adding the services provided by each county, or are they so similar? I mean, I know clean water, you know, is an extra. Library district might be extra. Sounded like Tualatin Parks and Rec was sort of an associated. They have a relationship, but not necessarily any fiduciary or budget responsibility. But I wonder if that would be of any value to show what the various services are offered by each county. And then that could allow for some type of differential. And then the other piece would be the overall, I could be missing it. So, but the overall budget of the county, because we know that capital improvement is not part of the operational budget. Some fiduciary funds are not. And the clean water budget probably is not included. I mean, it wouldn't be part of the regular county budget. And so if Multnomah, Clackamas, et cetera, if they have similar things, then that helps us kind of see the scope of that budget responsibility and of the service responsibility.
Yeah, I like both of the suggestions. I think part of the challenge might be how much information we can gather on our own and how much other jurisdictions are able to provide. But if it's information that we're able to gather on everything, I tend to lean towards more data is better.
Might I jump in just with one thing? I know other people have their hands raised, but when I was in Colorado, the Colorado Municipal League and the Colorado counties, they did various surveys. And so I'm wondering if that data are already collected, and then we could, I'm hopeful they would share that information with us.
Yeah, we at Multnomah County, we have several contacts and we participate in their surveys. So I know for most of the jurisdictions that we're talking about, at least speaking for myself, I feel like I have established relationships there and we'll be able to get quite a bit of information. Clackamas County does a pretty extensive elected official survey. So they're another partner that we might be able to check in with and see if they've already collected some of this information.
Go ahead, Steve.
Steve?
I just, the kind of stuck in my mind as COLA was mentioned. So for the general law counties, they have a budget committee, essentially a board compensation committee every budget year. So, but neither Multnomah County nor Washington County is doing that. It's an every other year. And so in Multnomah County, they did include, I think in the last few times, that the salaries would adjust at the same COLA that the rest of the employees got. So
Yeah.
Something along those lines, but just remember, this is a 2-year salary setting rather than a 1. So.
Yeah.
Aika?
Thank you. I really like the market, the template for the market. And I'm wondering if there would be value to add the population, because population of service came up a couple of different times. And unless I missed, I didn't see it in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, we can easily add that. Thank you.
That brought up something else when we were talking about, as Chair Harrington talked about, I'm responsible for, everybody votes for me or not, and the commissioners, it's just 1/4 of that county. And so they have, depending on how much you think of what the weight of constituent services are, is it 5% or whatever, the chair's constituents is 4 times the number of a county commissioner. So that's just one differential that you could think of, whether it's a 1%, 5%, whatever, or no percent. That's your decision. But there is that differential to look at possibly.
Susan?
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I muted myself there. I think on the budget piece of it, when we look at budget for Multnomah County, we always do general fund, and then we do the overall government budget, because of the fact that we know that there are a lot of special funds that come in, a lot of federal, state. So every jurisdiction has a general fund, and then there is the extra money. So I think breaking it up into those 2 columns would be very helpful. I do agree with the fact of looking at the areas that the jurisdictions have that are a little bit different. Once again, as I think with Multnomah County, we have the library district, which is very different than other jurisdictions. There's also interagency organizations that I would wonder if we would like to consider as well, because I know for Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah, we have a lot of agreed interagency work that we do, and that involves the commissioners quite a bit. Some of ours right now are around the emergency management for the state. So I think that with the current environment that we're in, that's a pretty significant piece of work that is done, and it has to be done with that collaboration with multiple counties.
Brad, do you want to jump in?
So I think the point on the districts versus representing the entire county is something that will be interesting in your research to find, because I know a lot of counties, even though they have 5 commissioners and one's a chair, they may be elected countywide. So I think that's a really good point to look at for data. And then I would second what Susan's saying about all of the intergovernmental cooperation that goes on, that does take up a lot of time. We have an entity called WACA which is communications too, our emergency communications. And so that's all the local jurisdictions together. That's pretty common actually in the metro area. Every jurisdiction county has something, a version of that. And then the chair was mentioning that the three chairs, they have a weekly meeting. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff going on. And I think you heard Chair Harrington kind of describing that connectivity. That's all I really had to say.
Thank you. So I wonder, because we kind of talked about where we can get this information, who might have pulled it together. So I'm wondering about how we approach that. If you know, a few different ideas. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, Brianna and I actually had a chance to kind of talk through what next steps were like. And of course, I'm not an expert in what the rules are here, but this is a project that she and I were both interested in continuing in data gathering. A lot of this, you just have to dig around on websites. And then, like I said, reaching out to the classification and compensation HR contacts that we already have. So I think we feel really comfortable continuing gathering this information once we know what we need to gather and who we're gathering it from, if that works for the group.
That would be great. Thank you. Is everyone fine with that? Okay. And then in terms of the internal comparator, we have that data provided from internal with the different, you know, with a few different roles. Are there other positions besides the ones that are on there that we would really want to pull in? Or thoughts about how we kind of finish compiling that internal piece? Go ahead, Heike.
I think I'd like to take a look at the information we have and compare it to the internal spreadsheet that we have, and with an eye towards with the testimony today, I think it would be helpful. So, I mean, I'd like to take a stab at it if Susan would like to do it as well. So I'd be open to taking a look at that.
Okay, awesome. So we just have a couple of minutes left. So I was hoping to walk through kind of a timeline of how we get to a decision, and get your input on that, just to make sure that that all makes sense, that we're not missing any pieces. So I will pull that up, share, and it's not too fancy, but essentially just proposing that we get to it like final product by April 9th, which is in 3 meetings. So I know we had talked about by March 31st, but we're kind of off a week. So we'd only have 2 weeks left to get there. So I don't know if this is realistic for compiling the data, or at least kind of taking the first run at it, being able to do it by like the Wednesday before we meet next, so that it could be sent out so we can all kind of like take a look at it before we actually meet. And then if so,
I throw out something, because when I originally talked to the county folks about this, we were targeting the end of April. So I don't know where the March came from. Okay. My name probably. so don't rush yourselves from that standpoint. If we got it done by the end of April, everybody would be thrilled.
Okay, that's great. I don't know. It could have been me. I probably wrote down March 31st for some reason. So we can probably just draw some of this out then, pretty much double time, which is great. We could really take the next couple of weeks working through the comparators. So maybe in our next meeting, if we plan on, in addition to the invited testimony, really digging into the comparators and kind of asking ourselves what's missing, what else do we need? Then after that, we'll hopefully be able to identify, you know, at least a couple of different options. There may be more than that, of different directions that we could go, so that we can either decide, is there one of those we really want to develop fully? Do we want to develop a couple of options so we can kind of dive in and discuss them? So that ultimately one of our last meetings will be deciding like, what is our recommendation? And then after that, it'll be going out and like writing the recommendation to make sure that the language and all of that is, reflects what we were intending. So I'll expand this timeline, but I just wanted to check in our last minute. Are there major pieces that are missing that are top of mind now? And I'll send this out after I draw it out a tiny bit, and we can revisit this also in our next meeting. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, nothing missing on this document, but I did want to make sure we talked about the list of comparators. I don't think we've finalized that yet. And so for us to gather the information, I don't know that that's going to happen today, but just wanted to throw that out there.
That's great. We can focus on that in our next meeting then. Anything else that anyone has before we close out our meeting?
I just, if there's other, what I'm going to do, I'll send you I have the population estimates for both Oregon, Washington, and California, but I'll send to Oregon and Washington. Yeah, I could send California too if you want, but then you'll have the numbers. You are all numbers people. I'm not the only one in the crowd. so I'll forward you all the certified estimates from each state, each of those 3 states. And if you want me to look at any other, let me know.
Okay. And then we'll have the list from Eva coming soon, I'm pretty sure, of the comparators that they've used for their internal efforts. So that'll be helpful. Well, great. It was nice to get to meet with you all today, and thank you for your time, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Do we have to have a motion to close the meeting? No, okay.
Yeah.
Business.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a wonderful weekend all.